All right, so everybody had the new packet on their desk, right? The first are just a couple quick review equations. Some of you are still struggling with the idea of using the least common denominator. Just do it, okay? Find the least common denominator, multiply through by it, then use your calculator and answer in exact form. So the common denominator here would be, so 6x divided by 2 would be 3x, 6x times 5. Don't forget to do it times everything. So 6 times x divided by 3 would be 2x, and 6 times negative 7 would be minus 42. So what are we going to get? Yeah, I got negative 72 as well. Everybody good? All right. What was the trick in the quiz that some of you forgot? Before you worry about the common denominator, make sure you distribute. Yep. 2/3 times 9 actually comes out, what, 6? So this is kind of a weird one because there's only a denominator in one spot. It's still easier if you multiply through by what? 3 though. So we'd get 6x minus 24 equals, what do we get on the right side? Anybody? 3 times 2 divided by 3, 2. And is this a plus 6? Yeah, make sure you're still distributing. All right, if I subtract and add the 24 over here. Now, a couple people got to this point and did the dividing backwards. Just be careful, okay? I know this isn't one that you would probably do backwards, but show that last step, okay? Don't skip steps and do something silly. Did anybody get their quiz back and saw a mistake? They were like, oh, I can't believe I did that. It's very easy to do. And because it's a 4 then, that's all you did on that section, it's very easy to retake as well. All right, so the new stuff on this worksheet, we're going to be factoring and solving by factoring. How do you know if you can solve something or if you can only factor it? Yeah, if there's not an equal sign, if you see x squared minus 25, all you can do is factor at x plus 5x minus 5. If it has an equal sign, then you can solve. You can say, well, either this is equal to 0 or this is equal to 0, which no one ever shows that step, right? Everybody good? So the difference is, does it have an equal sign? All right, we're going to do solving by square rooting and completing the square. That's one standard. And then we're going to do by quadratic formula. And you also, in that same standard, will have to know what a discriminant is and how to use it. All right, so starting with number 3, we're going to solve these by square rooting. So this would be standard 2, but it's not standard 2, right? We continued the numbering. Is it 7 or something? 6 is square rooting. Anybody see it? Is it 6?
Yeah.
It's this one, but do you know, this is on the back of the blue sheet. No wonder y'all looking at me like I'm crazy. You had a blue sheet. Do I have mine? It's on the back of it. Remember there was the side with all the linear standards? It's on the other side. What? Oh, no. Yes. The blue sheet that said linear review on the back is the quadratic stuff, okay? It's also where all the homework for the quadratic unit is listed. Otherwise, I would have passed out a new homework sheet at the back today. Now, do you remember what I'm talking about? Okay, it's not, we didn't call it Q2 this time. We called square rooting. Anybody know? It's also on the sheet we just did. We did through 4, so factoring is 5. This is 6, I think, right? Anyway, okay, and I think this one is 7. All right, so back here, this is 0.6, and it is solving by square rooting. So what can we do here? We don't want to square root yet. You always want to use your Algebra 1 brain first, which means isolate the x, or in this case, the x squared. So if we add 5, we get 3x squared equals 21. Then we have to divide before we square root, as we have to have an isolated variable. And then when we square root, what do we have to be careful of? That's a great question. Can you simplify it or not? Anybody know what else? Yes. There are two solutions to this question, positive and negative square root of 7. Do you remember, guys, when you graphed parabolas? Sometimes it never crossed the x. Sometimes it crossed only once or touched it. And sometimes it crossed twice and had two solutions, right? Okay. So anytime there's a squared, there's a possibility of up to two solutions. When you square root an x, okay, if the, this is really hard. There's a teacher at the middle school who teaches this wrong. If I wrote this down, how many solutions is there to that? 1. X equals 2. Because at no point was there an x squared. Do you see that? Okay. If I wrote this down, there's 2, because I could put a 2 in there squared and I'd get 4. I could put a negative 2 in and squared and I'd get 4. All right, so be careful. When there starts with an x squared, you're probably looking for two solutions. All right. This one is one students see on the quiz, and they do all kinds of extra work. They decide to FOIL it out, distribute the 3, which you have to do in that order if you were going to try it. Combine like terms, get it equal to 0, factor it all over again. Maybe if it doesn't factor, they do quadratic. There's a much easier, shorter way. Just pretend this is an unknown right now. We want to isolate that box. What would we do first? Add the 10. Now, I can't distribute because there's a squared there. Is there something else I can do to get rid of the 3? Divide. Now what can I do to get rid of the squared? Take the square root. But I do have to be careful. When I take a square root of anything with an x, I get how many solutions? 2. So what happens over here? Square root of 25 has to become plus or minus 5. If I stopped right now and I put a 5 in here, 5 plus 2. Yeah. Why am I confusing? Well, I got to finish solving the problem. That's why. Okay. We need to subtract 2. So we have x equals, and over here we have negative 2 plus or minus 5, which you need to simplify. You're in pre-calc. You need to tell me what those two numbers are. What's negative 2 plus 5? And negative 2 minus 5 would be, okay. So if I put a 3 back in here, 3 plus 2 squared is 5, squared is 25. Negative 7 plus 2 would be negative 5. When you square it, you get back to 25, okay? And it would check back up here as well. Two solutions. All right. And one that doesn't simplify, well, how are we going to start this one? Just square root. Good job. So what do we get on the right-hand side? Plus or minus the square root of 5. Perfect. Uh-oh. But I square rooted this as well, so what's gone here? Yeah. Sorry about that. So I have just x minus 3 over here. Those undid each other. So I need to add 3 to both sides. I would write it 3 plus or minus the square root of 5. You could write it plus or minus square root of 5 plus 3. This is okay, but you have to be careful. The plus or minus is on the square root, right? And it's not times 3. Don't put the 3 behind the plus or minus. Oh, once in a while I get somebody who'll write this, plus or minus 3 square roots of 5. Is that the same thing? Okay. Any questions on square rooting? Can handle those? That's one standard on the quiz. Dominic, did you get done? I'm sorry. Okay. Then we have completing the square. Okay, this is nobody's favorite, but it becomes very important later in the course. And you have to do these by completing the square on the quiz because that's what the directions say. So if your work doesn't match, you didn't show completing the square, you won't get credit. So completing the square is when we isolate both of the x's on one side and we put a blank on both sides. Does this sound familiar to anybody? Remember a little bit of that? Okay. Then the rule is you take, if this is a x squared plus bx, you take the b and you divide by 2. So in the parenthesis here, we'll go x plus, what's half of the 6? 3. And then you put it squared. Now, if I wrote out x plus 3 times x plus 3, I'd get x squared plus 3x plus 3x plus 9 when I did FOIL, right? So that would be x squared plus 6x plus 9. So in order for this to be equivalent to this step, what goes back in here? 9. Okay, so you take half of b and then you square it to get back to this blank. And then whatever you did to the left side, you have to do to the right side. So we add and get 16 over there. Then what? We can square root. We're back to the same thing we did before. So this side is just x plus 3. But this side, because of the x being a squared before we square rooted it, becomes plus or minus 4. If I subtract 3, what will I get for my two solutions? 4 minus 3 would be 1. Negative 4 minus 3 would be, there we go. We could have subtracted the 7 over to this side and then factored, but the directions say you have to show me completing the square. All right, let's practice that again because some of you are looking at me like I'm crazy. Does everybody kind of remember this blank thing? Okay, so you isolate the x's together first and move everything else over to the other side. The second step is you put in the blank on both sides. Then you take half of b. Be careful. What's half of b this time? Okay, x minus 5, right? Not plus, because this was a negative 10. So you have a negative 5. Then you square it to put it back in this blank. What is negative 5 times negative 5? Positive 25. Whatever you did to the left, you do to the right. What is that, 36? Oh, this one has two, this worksheet, I guess, has 2 answers that come out exact. Because if I square root both sides, what will I get? Plus or minus 6. So if I add the 5 over there, I'll have 5 plus or minus 6, which is 11 or negative 1. Both of those solutions would work, okay? If you put it back in, you'd get 121 minus 110, which would be 11. If you put a negative 1 in, you'd get 1 plus 10 is 11. They both work. All right. Then there's an evil one. Why is this evil? Okay, so what's the first thing we have to do? Move the 4 over to the other side, and we can put the blanks on at the same time. Okay, not much room on my paper. It's also evil because it's not going to come out nice. Use fractions, guys. We have to stop being terrified of fractions, okay? Half of this is just going to be what? 13 over 2. When we square it, you just square the top and the bottom. So you get what? I know what 13 squared is? Over 2 squared, which is 4. Okay, this is ridiculously scrunched in here. Oh, did I almost squeeze it in there? 169 over 4 added to 4. Okay, now use your calculator. 4 plus 169 divided by 4. Math, enter, enter. 185 over 4? No? It's probably wrong. Someone help me. 185 over 4. Okay. I warned you this one was nasty. Now what? Square root both sides. On the left, we just get x plus 13 over 2 equals. Now, plus or minus, this is the moment that things get a little better because you did fractions. Okay, you can't leave a decimal in a radical. Another weird mathematician rule. But the top is square root of 185. The bottom is square root of 4. What's square root of 4? 2, which is really nice because remember there's also a dumb rule about you can't have a radical in the denominator, and this one doesn't. Now, let's subtract the 13 halves over to the other side, so we'll have a negative 13 halves plus or minus the square root of 185 over 2. Now, we should probably check if 185 simplifies. What's the only thing you can maybe think of that goes in there? 5, because it ends in a 5. 5 goes in there how many times? 37 times. Is either one of those nice, right? Going to be a square root. So we're done. Thank goodness, right? No decimals. Wants exact answers. We good? Kinda, sorta? If we have time, we might need to come back and do another one with an odd number, you think? Because they don't come out so nice, and there is one on the quiz. All right, let's practice some factoring. Which was, and can we solve these? Yes, because they say equal 0. All right, let's see how fast we can go. Who can factor factors of 9 that make 8? 9 and 1. And negative 9, we need a negative 8 here, so we need negative 9 times positive 1. Everybody okay? Now, do I need to write out, this is the step I called take your turn being equal to 0. Students don't get why we do this, but the only way to multiply and make 0, what? You can have 15 things to multiply, but the only way they're going to equal 0 is if one of them along the way was 0. So it's got to either be this one or this one that was equal to 0. So you don't have to write that step out, but I just want you to understand why we get 9 or negative 1. Any questions? All right, what can we do to number 10? Okay, we could take out a 2. Good idea. How did I do? Did I divide everything right? Now, this is what gets a little tricky for students because excuse me, if you're factoring only, you can't throw that 2 away. But is 2 going to be a solution to this question? Okay, because when we go to play take your turn being equal to 0 here, 2 can't equal 0, right? I'm going to leave it there for a minute. Okay, now I have x squared, so I have an x and an x. What factors of 14 make 5? Okay, and I need it to be a positive 5, but a negative 14. Positive 7 and negative 2. All right, so I have 3 things that are multiplying here. A 2, an x plus 7, and an x minus 2. So that one could equal 0, that one could equal 0, or that one could equal 0. I don't know what Hofbauer's smoking, but 2 cannot equal 0, right? So when we divide that out, it's just gone. So what are the 2 things x can equal? X can equal 2. Okay, 0 can't equal 2 because 0 is... All right, can I just erase? Well, maybe we can fit this one in. This one's pretty easy. How does this one factor? Yes. If it says solve by factoring, make sure you show the factoring. I know you could move the 49 over in square root. What's the difference? This way you'll always remember there's 2 solutions, right? If you factored it. If you moved it over in square rooted, sometimes you forget. Yes.
Okay, like that.
If it said, Kevin, if it just said solve eventually, I'd be fine with that. Okay. If it says solve by factoring in the directions, make sure you show that factoring step. That's all. Because there's lots of ways to solve a lot of these. We could do completing the square. It's just each section is going to tell you how I want you to solve it. Good question. All right, little more factoring on here. Yes? What do we have to do before we can factor? Okay, I want to show you something that somebody's going to do. Is that true?
No.
Any of it? They're saying either this, I can fake out 6, so either this is negative 8 or this is, are there only 2 ways to get to negative 8? I could do 1 times negative 8. I could do 16 times negative 1/2. I could do 80 times 0.1, negative 0.1. There's infinite ways to get 8. You can't do the take your turn being equal to 8 game. It's got to equal what? 0. All right, so x squared minus 6x, to add it to the other side would be plus 8. How does that factor, guys? 4 and 2 will make 8, and it needs to be a positive 8, but they need to make negative 6. So I get positive 4 and positive 2. Too fast for anybody? All right, now we have a couple factoring ones where the coefficient isn't 1, and this is where some of you have learned to use slide and divide, and it's really not going to be your friend, because we're going to eventually be solving things like this second semester. And going to be able to do slide and divide on cosecants? No. Not so much, okay? So you need to learn to factor by just doing a little process of elimination here. 2x squared minus x minus 3 equals 0. I don't know why I have parentheses there, but I just subtracted the 3 over. Okay, so the first term here is a 2x squared. The only way to get that is a 2x times a 1x, right? Now the good news is the last one back here is also prime. Only way to get that is a 1 and a 3 or a 3 and a 1. So you pick one and you try it, and if it doesn't work, you try the other way. What do you want to try first? Okay. How do you check if it works? Yeah, you FOIL it back together, and the 2 that really matter are the inside-outside here, because 2 times 1 is going to give you 2x squared. 3 times 1 is going to give you a 3 back here. But we need it to be a negative 3. And we need, this term gives us a 3x, and the outside gives us a 2x. So which one do we want to be negative if we want a negative 1 in the middle? So then we need the negative here and the positive here. Try it. Foil it all the way out. If it doesn't work, Miss Abruzzo always says, never erase on these. If it doesn't work, draw a line through it lightly, but keep track of what you already tried so you don't go back to it. Does that make sense? All right. So we got it to factor. Now what? Either this equals 0 or this one equals 0. Be careful. It's not 3 and negative 1, right? You would have to divide by 2 here, so you get 3 halves or negative 1. All right, what about number 14? We can take out a 3, yep. If we take out a 3, we'll have 3x squared minus 1x minus 10 equals 0. Did I do that right? Okay. We can leave the 3, but it's never going to equal 0. Okay, to make a 3x squared, we'd only have 2 possibilities, 3 and 1, right? Or 1 and 3, but to make 10, what do you want to try? 5. In that order? Yeah. Okay, that would be 5, and this would be 6. I think we might be onto something to get a negative 1, right? Which would need to be negative? We need it to be a negative 6x and a positive 5 to give us the negative 1 in the middle here. Okay, so 3 times negative 2 and positive 5 times 1. Does that give us the negative 10 at the back? All right, so now that we checked it, how do we set it equal to 0? Well, 3 can't equal 0. Yep. 3x plus 5, can that be 0? What would we get? And then x minus 2 would make x 2. Questions on factoring? All right, I hope your brain isn't too overwhelmed because I'm going to talk about quadratic formula still. The quadratic formula is here. You have to have it memorized, just like you had to memorize standard form, point slope, okay? It's going to be on the quiz. It's going to say write this. This form is when you take whatever's in front of the x squared and call it a, whatever's in front of the x and call it b, whatever the constant is when it's equal to 0, it only works when it's equal to 0, and call that c. Then it says the opposite of b plus or minus, and that's because we could have 2 solutions, the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Couple things you got to remember. If you're doing this on your calculator later, you're going to need to put the b in parentheses when you square it, right? And the other thing to remember is that the 2a is really also a quantity. You can't divide out part of it. You got to divide out the whole thing if you need to. We'll talk about that later. All right. So what are a, b, and c on 15? Quickly, anybody? A is 1, b is negative 4, and c is 1. Okay. So we start out with x equals the opposite of b plus or minus square root of. Now, negative 4 squared. You either need to put it in parentheses when you square it, or just square it in your head and write it down. 16, right? I just write down 16 to save myself that pain. And then minus 4 times the a times the c. All over 2 times a. Now you're going to need to show work, and they need to be exact answers. Okay? So you type in just what's under the radical. Don't type square root on your calculator because I don't want a decimal. When you type in 4 squared minus 4 times 1, you get what?
4.
I don't think so. This part is 4, but wasn't this 16?
Yeah.
So 16 minus 4 is 12. All over 2. All right. Remember we said we're going to have to simplify radicals. So this breaks down as a perfect square has to be one of them. Okay, I can't use 2 and 6 because neither one of those are perfect squares. If I make it square root of 4 times square root of 3, the square root of 4 is exactly 2. So I have 4 plus or minus 2 square roots of 2 all over 2. Now, this is what someone's going to do. They're going to say this 2 and this 2 cancel, and there's my answer. Okay. Here's my meme. Every time you do this, you kill a kitten. Okay. You can't cancel part of something like this. This is a whole quantity on the bottom and a whole quantity on the top. So I could take a 2 out of the top and cancel it. I honestly usually teach students for these to just rewrite this as 4 is being divided by 2, and so is 2 square roots of 2 being divided by 2. Separate it to 2 fractions. Then what does it reduce to? 2 plus or minus square root of 2. This reduces and this reduces. Yes, it should. Thank you. Fix me, fix me. No wonder you're all confused. Sorry about that. All right, I'm going to move these next 2 to another page here real quick. All right, we're trying this one. What are A, B, and C? All right, so X equals the opposite of B plus or minus the square root of, what's B squared? Minus 4 times A times C. What's somebody going to do now? This is going to turn out positive, right? 4 times 2 times negative 5. It's negative 40, but it's minus negative 40, so it's going to become plus. Just use your calculator. Should be 76, I think. Yes? Did someone type it? Type it 36 minus 4 times 2 times negative 5. Okay. Now, 76. Does 4 go in there, guys? So we have square root of 4 and square root of 18? 19. Good, because 19 doesn't break down. All right. So we're going to have 6 plus or minus, how do we simplify that? 2 and square root of 19. And they are both over a 4. So 6 divided by 4 is 3/2. And back here, this 2 goes into this 4, and I get square root of 19 over 2. Or you could have left it 3 plus or minus the square root of 19 all over 2. You can't reduce into the radical. Okay, that guy in jail doesn't get reduced ever unless you bring out a factor. But you can't divide something that's not in jail into something that is in jail, if we call that a little jail. All right. Do I have 2 minutes left? Okay. I'm going to come back 17 if I have time. I want to talk about the discriminant. The discriminant is B squared minus 4AC. It's the part under the radical. It does not include the radical. It's just B squared minus 4AC. So on this question, what's B? Negative 5 squared minus 4 times A times C would give me 25 minus 8. Did I do that right? Is 17. So the discriminant is 17. So if I was doing this in quadratic formula, I would have the opposite of this, opposite of b, plus or minus the square root of 17. So I would get how many solutions? 2 solutions, because it's going to be plus or minus square root of 17. If I did this question, b squared would be 25 minus 4 times negative 3 times negative 10. That would be negative 120. I get negative 105, 195, negative 95. Anybody helping me? I have no idea. That's probably wrong. But if I was doing quadratic, I'd get plus or minus the square root of negative number. Does that have real solutions? No, so this has no real solutions. If I did b squared minus 4ac here, I would get 0. So if I was doing quadratic, I'd have negative b plus or minus the square root of 0, which is 0, right? So I'd get 1 solution because the plus or minus wouldn't matter. So if b squared minus 4ac is greater than 0, there's 2 solutions. b squared minus 4ac is less than 0, there's no real solutions. And if b squared minus 4ac is equal to 0, there's 1 real solution. If I had read that, I think it would have explained it better. I wouldn't have had to write all that, but okay. So your homework, guys, is to do the evens on worksheet 2. We can go back and finish a couple we skipped tomorrow, but you should be able to do worksheet 2 tonight. All right, class is over, but I'm going to go ahead and finish these 2 examples so that the video has them. Maybe I am, if I can get my pen to work. There we go. All right, so we have to make this one equal to 0. And then we'd have A is 3, B is negative 1, and C is negative 6. So the opposite of B, B1 plus or minus the square root of B squared is going to be positive 1 minus 4 times A times C all over 2 times 3. So we'd have 1 plus or minus the square root of, let's see, 6 times 3 is 18, times 4 is 72. It's going to be positive, and this one I think is square root of 73 all over 6. You can leave it like this because this one doesn't simplify, it's prime. Or you can write 1/6 plus or minus square root of 73 over 6. I sure hope I did that right. 12 times 6 is 72 and 1. Yep, seems right. All right, and I have one more to finish up. I hope you got this part when I was going real fast here. The deal is, it says here that if this is equal to 0, then there's only 1 solution. If this is negative, then there are no real solutions. The other possibility would be that b squared minus 4ac would be greater than 0 or positive, and then there would be 2 real solutions. So on the quiz, it's going to say, what is D? And then it's going to say, what does that mean about the number of real solutions? Now, I do want to check this one because I feel like 25 minus 4 times 3 times negative 10. Oh, this was wrong? Was it? No, I didn't type something right. I think it is right. Yeah, this is negative 95. And that means there's no real solutions. And this one is 0. And that's supposed to say 1 real solution. All right, so last example. Determine the nature of these roots Now, you can take out a 2 on this question, but you can also just use A is 2, B is negative 12, and C is 18. So B squared would be 12 squared minus 4 times A times C. Oh, that is a negative 12. All right, doesn't matter. 144 minus 144 is 0, so the discriminant is 0, which it will ask on the quiz. And we discussed that that means when you do this, you're just going to end up with negative b over 2a, which is going to be one solution. So it's a unique real solution. Okay. Now, 2a evens is what's assigned. If you're struggling with any of this, work on 2b, or 2a and b, the evens, sorry. But you can do odds if you need extra practice. All right, hope the video is complete now.